Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast with Mike and Mike. Sales is a thinking process. This podcast will help you learn about what works in sales, how to hone your skills, and increase your success. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and this week we've got another special guest. We've got Scott Ingram, the host of the Sales Success Stories podcast. Mike, this is great. It's always fun to have other podcasters on. I mean, we always talk sales, but then to bring another podcaster, and this is significant in another way. Scott is our first guest from Texas. So tell us how you...
Texas. Yeah, not Texas, Jody. Scott's from Austin.
Well,
There's a difference.
I didn't want to be the one to say that.
So I am really excited to have Scott on the podcast. I've got a little bit of a podcast crush from the standpoint of some of the guests that he's had on his show, including guests that I've kind of come across in my career in the past, either directly or indirectly. Bill Pye was one of those guests. So Scott, thanks for joining us. Why don't you share a little intro with the audience?
Yeah, happy to do it. Thanks for having me. I've enjoyed listening to your show as well. So it's always fun to get to chat with the fellow podcasters. So I have been in sales the last 15 years, predominantly kind of B2B SaaS tech type sales. And the better part of that last 8 years or so has really been in the marketing technology space. So I was at Eloqua before the IPO and through the Oracle acquisition, left Oracle, and since then have played with some smaller companies and now a professional services partner in that space. So I haven't gotten too far away from it. The network there has been really powerful, and I really, really enjoy it. And about a year ago, I've always been frustrated by the fact that nearly all of the sales content out there comes from quote unquote sales experts who wrote a book and did whatever else, but they haven't sold anything but themselves in years or decades. And I thought, you know what, this is nuts. I think sales is evolving really, really quickly with the influx of technology and just the number of channels and the ways people can be interrupted. This isn't the day of the Rolodex, the phone, and the fax and everything else, right? There's so much more going on. And I wanted to hear from those who were the very best, number one top selling sales professionals. What are they doing to be number one? And that's what I've done. So for the last year, every other week, we produce a new episode where I interview somebody that is the number one player in their organization. Or when I'm talking to folks at LinkedIn and ADP and Microsoft and some of these other big guys, I'll settle for the top 1% because it's nearly possible to figure out across all their divisions exactly who is the outright number one.
Awesome. Can you share with the audience a bit about what you've learned over the course of that year and the number of interviews that you've had? We like to, at Catalyst Sale, we like to identify pattern recognition, or we like to look at pattern recognition as a way to help scale and accelerate growth. So when you think of the folks that you've spoken with, what are some of the patterns that you've identified?
Yeah, and that's really what I look for as well. And that's part of the fun of coming on other podcasts, because I don't have really a vehicle on my own show to talk about the themes that I'm seeing. But there's certain things that are just sort of a given, right? You're not going to be number one unless you are working your butt off, right? So of course, you're working hard, you're working long hours, you're doing those types of things. But I do think, well, there's what's the other commonality is that there's not a lot of commonalities. So what I think is going on there is the folks that I've talked with have a very high degree of self-awareness. They have a good understanding of themselves and what their strengths are, and they work the crud out of that. They seem to apply a massive effort into being the best version of themselves and executing on that. So, and what's hard about that, especially if you're looking at that from a sales leadership perspective, because again, I guess I didn't specify, all of these folks are individual contributors. So I talk across a variety of roles, whether it be sales development or business development type roles, a lot of field sales, everything else. I think what makes that insight challenging from a leadership perspective is, well, how do I scale that? I have to take the number of personalities in my sales team and everybody's going to be doing their own thing. I think that's really challenging, but what it does is it comes back and reemphasizes, I think the thing that we're starting to recognize as an industry is training maybe isn't what we need. What we need is coaching. And I think it ties to that really well. The other thing I just realized in a recent interview was looking back, I don't think I've had anybody on my show who was successful despite their boss. Their boss is always a very strong, very important leader that is helping them get to that level and empowering them. And it's not something that they have to work around or work through. And I think that's really, really meaningful in a lot of ways. So let me take a breath because I can keep going. There's 3 or 4 or 5 of these things that I think are the most common themes. But before I get them all out, I'm sure you have thoughts and questions.
Yeah, one of the thoughts that just comes up is the difference between training and coaching. Can you expand on that? How would you define, or how would you distinguish between training and coaching?
Yeah, so I think training that tends to be the one size fits all. And, some of the folks, the 2 training programs that are most often mentioned are Sandler and Challenger, right? And so both of those programs, and I think Sandler in particular is probably better than most in that it's kind of an ongoing thing, right? We're not going to just stick you in training for 2 days and shove something down your throat. You at least get an opportunity to kind of practice that. But it's just this is the methodology. This is the way we do it. Here's the information, go. Versus coaching being, and typically after some type of training has been delivered, is the nuance and the application and helping connect okay, this is our process. This is the way that we're trying to do things. What's going on in your deal? What is it about, the way that you operate and your personality that we can apply to this to accelerate the deal, grow the deal, actually win the deal in the end? And when I look at my own experience with the leaders that I've worked for, the worst leaders were those who were very micromanaging and insisted that we needed to do it their way. Very best leaders, and what I always look for is I need somebody that's just going to make me better. I'm pretty good at this stuff. I've been doing it for a while. I will have a very strong opinion about the approach. Let me bring that to you, and now let's polish it. Like, let's make it shine. What did I miss? Right? So instead of, no, that's not going to work. Let's do it my way, which won't work because I'm not you. Right? That's, I think, that difference. And the more folks that really apply that, and again, it comes down to it's not just great sales leadership, it's great leadership in general, right? It's empowering your people, it's entrusting them and knowing that they know what to go do. And it's just helping them become that much better and pushing them and helping them get to the next level.
Yeah, the world would be pretty boring if everybody operated the same, if everybody was exactly the same. And I think there've been a couple of books about that, like Brave New World and 1984. And you go into that mechanism of, hey, everybody's a widget, everybody's a cog that fits inside this machine. And that is not good sales leadership. It's not good organization leadership. It does not create an opportunity for innovation. And if you want your sales team to be innovative, if you want your organization to be innovative, which everybody is out there saying, we innovate in this way or we innovate in that way, be careful if you look at your processes and those processes are designed to force people to do the same thing. When we talk about it as sales as a thinking process, you've hit on personalization. When you think of personality and how that applies to sales and being successful, how do the successful sales reps use personality to change the way that they work with individual clients? Are they the same person with every client, or do they tend to adapt a bit depending on the client they're working with? And have you come across that in your experience with those you've interviewed?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it depends a little bit on the situation. So 2 people come to mind because you talk about process. And one of my favorite interviews, I have a few, it's like picking your favorite child. But David Weiss at ADP is a sales process machine. Like, he has got this whole thing so figured out and so dialed in, but he also is a very human, very likable guy. So I think at the end of the day, it's always situational, right? You're never going to treat everybody exactly the same. Their challenges are different. The buying committee and those who are involved are different. But the other individual I'm thinking of is Justin Bridgmohan. And Justin is, again, similarly process driven, but in such a way, he's so front loaded in the way that he operates. And he's built a situation where he's working to get his buyer to buy into his process. And at some level, actually, I think this isn't the way he described it, but when I look at what he does, he's almost selling them on his process, not the solution, right? This is what we need to go do together to help you be successful in the end, right? You've never bought my unique solution before. I have sold it and helped implement it in, dozens of situations. So trust me, trust my process, trust that we know how to get this done. And to the point where if you're not going to say like, okay, yes, we'll go do it your way. He's like, okay, well, I'm just going to deprioritize the heck out of you. And that's brings me to another theme is qualifying is just so high on the list and so critical, right? You can't be the best if you're wasting time on deals that are never going to close.
So critical. And we talk about it kind of ad nauseum about the importance of qualification and where it fits in our overall process. And that qualification is not just about you, it's about the client and it's about determining fit inside the organization. If the fit doesn't exist, you shouldn't be wasting your time working with that prospect, working with that organization. Maybe you look to go someplace else inside the organization if you think it still will fit, but maybe not within that business unit. But qualification relates directly to time management. If you're working on opportunities that do not have legs, you're not necessarily doing the important things that are going to impact your success. You're going to find you're wasting a lot of resources.
Yeah. So just the most recent episode I just launched with Jelle Den Dunen out of the Netherlands. He's the number one seller at Bullhorn, which is a SaaS software for recruiting firms. Yep. He's been sort of tracking this and he's like, yeah, in the past, I would manage 18 deals a quarter. He says, now I'm managing 8. I'm closing 64% and I'm the number one seller in the organization. Right. So again, it's being ruthless. And at the end of the day, you build up so much more trust and credibility when you tell a prospect no, right? Because look, this isn't the right fit. We're not going to go down this path because you're not going to be successful. I may make some money, but in the long run, this is bad for everybody.
And I like the ruthless is a great way to approach it. I mean, you are as sales professionals, so much of our compensation is based on commission. We are ultimately mercenaries. And mercenaries with a clear objective. By executing on that clear objective, you will see a change in the way that you're compensated. You will benefit from that. And the beauty of being in a sales professional role from my perspective is you're connecting dots with people in an organization that help them solve a problem or challenge that they have, whether they've realized it or not. You might help reveal it, but ultimately, and I think Don Miller really hit the nail on the head here when he was talking on our podcast about it, but you're a guide that helps your client be a hero. And if you're taking the approach of trying to be the hero all the time, you're not going to be successful. So another question, Scott. So as you think about all this information that you've captured, how often are you getting requests from people inside your organization, whether they're on the sales side of the organization or they're someplace else, or from people outside of your organization saying, hey, can you help? I'd like to do better in sales. I'd like to improve my craft. Are you getting those kind of requests from people?
Yeah, a lot. And so, part of what I was trying to solve for is not just for me, but the folks that I've had on the show as well. Because if I'm getting those requests, they're getting them even more, right? Especially those that work in the larger organization. So at one level, I saw, and part of my positioning for them is think of this as mentoring at scale, right? You can have 1-2 hour conversation with me. My episodes are pretty long. They average probably 75 or 90 minutes. I like to go really deep. But you can have that conversation and then share that with other folks many times and stop having that lunch meeting over and over and over again, and also use it as a test. What I find, and we can go crazy on sort of the mentoring front here, is the way that you honor a mentor, the way that you pay a mentor is by executing on their suggestions and doing what they say. So it's one of those things where you can kind of get set up and say, look, listen to this. Ask me your follow-up questions after this, because this is going to answer probably 80 or 90% of what you already have. Most people won't even take the time to go and listen and do the work. And so it's sort of that qualifying step. But what I've now done is frankly, I'm being really selfish about this. I have developed all of these amazing mentors in this great network over the course of the last year, but all you get to listen to is the one conversation I had with them. So I'm actually building an event here in Austin in May called the Sales Success Summit. And the whole purpose of that, well, there's a few things, but one is I'm putting my best presenters on the stage so you get to learn from actual sales professionals who are at the top of their game right now, right? Not somebody who's trying to sell you a book, not somebody who's trying to, pitch training to your company or anything else like that. And I'm trying to fix a lot of things that drive me crazy about events and create an opportunity for a lot of these relationships to get built. So for example, one, I hate hotel conference rooms and giant rows of chairs that are all stuck together. So we're doing it at the Alamo Draft House. And in Austin, this is maybe one of the original movie theater chains that developed the full service model. So little table in front of you, full menu, full bar, people coming to your seat, bringing you the things that you order. So, hey, I figured, hey, that's a much more comfortable chair. I like it when people bring me food and drink. And hey, there's a movie screen at the front of the room. So it'll be pretty easy to view the presentation. But structurally, there's never more than 90 minutes of content before we have a 30-minute break. So there's just a lot of those networking breaks. And then the thing I'm most excited about is after we have happy hour, so more networking, then we're going to do a dine around. I've picked out about a dozen iconic Austin restaurants. So whether you want Tex-Mex, you want barbecue, you want 5-star sushi, whatever it is, I'm spreading out my presenters, and you've got an opportunity in a very intimate place to go spend time with them and just have a meal and spend time with not only that top sales rep, but other people like you who are really driven and motivated and taking the actions, right? These are the people that are going to listen and are taking advantage of mentors and going to take their game to the next level. And frankly, those are the people I want to know. That's who I want to hang out with, because I've seen this already in my career. They get to be in amazing places 10 or 15 years down the road.
Awesome. So one of the things I enjoy most about conferences when I get a chance to go to them or when I participate in them are the side conversations, the conversations that happen between sessions, the things that happen in the hallway, those times where you get this kind of group collaboration and engagement. How are you going to support that beyond the dine around and that other kind of stuff? Or is that something you're planning on supporting?
Yeah, big time. In fact, I hired one of my very good friends, a guy named Tom Singer, who is a professional MC, and he has a program that he calls the Conference Catalyst. And that's his job, right? His job is to help create that atmosphere and that dynamic to make it okay. I mean, we're all salespeople. I think this is more likely to go in that direction had we left it to its own device, but I'm not letting anything that important to chance. And so Tom is a master at making these things happen. And to your point, he talks about its serendipity at the conference, right? But you can be proactive about that. You can make that stuff happen if you work at it. And so we are going to teach some of that, and we're going to enable that massively.
So I'm an introvert. I know there are a lot of people, including my wife, where she's listened to the episodes of the podcast where I talk about it, and she's like, you're an introvert. You'll talk to anyone. I will talk to anyone one-on-one. I will talk to anyone that don't feel like I'm going to bother. Like if I set up to a bar and someone's there and we're at an airport, I'll have a conversation with just about anyone. But in a large group setting, I don't want to interrupt a group of 5 people talking. I'd rather go, stand over in the corner. So how do you, and I know that there are a lot of successful salespeople that are introverts. And there's a lot of stuff that's coming out now that's saying, hey, being introverted is a really good thing because of the capability to listen, not that need to go out there and portray yourself out there. So when you've talked to people that you've interviewed, has that come up as another theme? Are you hearing that people are introverted? Have you had experience with introverts as interview people or participants? And if not, how are you going to plan to address that at the conference?
Yeah, great question. It has absolutely come up. Not quite scientific enough that I've made sure to ask in every interview, but I would say it's really close to half. And some of the standouts that really come to mind, I mean, there's a bunch. The first interview I did, and it's still one of my favorites, with Mike Dudgeon at LinkedIn, absolute introvert. Justin Bridgemahan, who we talked about earlier for sure on that scale. Barry Womack, who was the #1 seller at Cvent, similar thing. And, again, it's that application of strengths. I actually fit that mold too. And in fact, I remember when I was doing onboarding at Eloqua, we had this, I don't remember what we called it, but, they brought kind of the new group of new hires together there at headquarters. And we did a Myers-Briggs or one of those things. And, I tested introvert because we're all kind of breaking out into different groups. And everybody's looking at me like, you have got to be kidding me. There is no way in hell you're an introvert. I'm like, no, actually, that's total misconception, right? And again, I think there's so many stereotypes in sales, and the stereotypical seller is never an introvert. But again, it happens so frequently. So again, it's enabling and empowering sort of all of those things. I think that perhaps the listening audience to podcasts probably trends more introvert than not, right? I mean, we're sort of seeking out the information. I don't need to consume it in a group. I'm going to do this by myself. And that's why, particularly in this first year with the event, I'm limiting it to one screen. So, the biggest theater they have seats 196 people. So that's how big the event's going to be with everybody, because that's what I want. I have never been to Dreamforce on purpose. Don't need to hang out with 160,000 people. That's insane. So, this is really about creating something that's meaningful, where you'll have a comfortable opportunity to connect with probably a really good percentage of the people there in attendance sharing that experience.
Awesome. We went to Dreamforce last year, and it was the first time I had attended. I think there were 120,000 people. I think I read that 160,000 this year, and it was just an absolute madhouse. The only reason I'll go there again is if I'm speaking or I'm going there on behalf of a client, and we were there supporting a client last year. So that's Dreamforce is kind of like my nightmare, walking out there and seeing the escalators when you look down at, thousands and thousands of people.
Your liver doesn't like it either.
So I love the name of the person who's helping you with the catalyst in the conference catalyst. I think it's a great name. It's, we're a bit biased. We like it. As I think about stereotypes in sales, how many of what percentage of your audience, the folks that you've interviewed, when you think back over the last year, what percentage of them would you say you could apply a common stereotype to?
Kind of one. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing, and there may be a strange kind of confirmation bias thing going on here. So I met a gentleman who, kind of kindred spirit, I have a copy of his book here. It's called 21 Secrets of $1 Million Sellers. And so Steve Harville, his publisher, sent me the book, and he happened to be in Austin. I said, I think we need to get together, because the first thing he talks about is he went out and interviewed 175 people who were all producing $1 million or more. So again, based on real conversations, and we kind of sat down together and talked. I do think that there is a group of people, and I don't have to worry about offending them because they're not listening. And unfortunately, it's a bigger percentage of the top sales community that I think we would like, that are frankly just assholes, right? It's the bull in the china shop. I will ramrod you, and they'll do whatever. I mean, we've all seen it. We've all been on the teams with them. They're pretty toxic, but they produce. And I haven't had any of those folks on my show because I don't think they do it. I don't think that there's an interest. Those are, of the few people who have told me no, I'm pretty sure that's who they were. So you maybe don't get that view of, hey, if you want to be an asshole in sales and win, this is the model. I don't have that yet. But at the same time, one of the very best sales leaders I ever worked with is now the CEO of Workfront. His name is Alex Shootman. And when I started at Eloqua, he was our chief revenue officer, and he drew on a napkin for me. He drew this quadrant. And on the left axis, it was getting it done. And on the bottom axis, it was doing it right. And you can sort of plot a grid there and make 4 boxes. And so what he did was he said, okay, well, look, this is really simple. In the top right quadrant, you're getting it done. You're doing it right. You're a superstar. We're going to reward you. We're going to recognize you. You're doing a great job, right? Yep. The bottom quadrant, you're not doing it right. You're not getting it done. That's easy. You're probably fired, right? Then it got interesting though. And this is where I think the culture that we see on sales teams and where it can go wrong, like this is the way you fix it. So he said, look, if you're not getting it done, but you're doing it right. We will coach you. We will work with you. We want to move you up, and we will do everything we can to try and get you there so that you don't end up fired. But the real key to this whole thing is if you're getting it done, but you're not doing it right, you're fired faster. And that is the way that you fix just that toxic culture. And I saw them do it. I mean, they lived that. They fired some bad people who were delivering amazing numbers, but in a way that long-term was very, very bad for the business. It was bad for the rest of the sales organization. And it's something that nobody seems to talk about because, again, there are that group of folks out there that, well, I can't fire him though, because that's like $4 million. How am I going to replace that?
Yeah. And
so people are afraid.
And it gets you into that trap. And I mean, this is not, I'm going to take this to a very dark place, but in this time period, there's a lot of stuff in the media about Harvey Weinstein and various others who abuse their power. How much power are you going to let people abuse before you start saying, you know what, our organization is going to be in much better shape if we take those who want to contribute to the success of the overall team. And actually, in many of those instances, when you let those people go, and they go find another job someplace else, either they change behavior, maybe they learn from it, or they find an environment where they might be a better fit because they're dealing with the same level of challenges. If they're an asshole inside the organization, they probably feel it. I mean, I've been called an asshole before. So I've evolved over time. I have not yet moved to the point where I'm Mike Connor and I start hugging people, but my approach has definitely changed over time. I've really calmed down. My biggest challenge early in my career was empathy. It was kind of putting myself in the shoes of others because I looked at everything as ones and zeros. I went through and I said, you know what? This is either good or it's not. It's black or it's white. This is what we're trying to do. And if it comes down to execution, if it's going to put goals on the board, if it's going to score touchdowns, if it's going to win the game, let's go out and win the game. And then I realized, you know what, if you get back to the fundamentals of treating people like people, you can be so much more successful. You can make a much bigger impact on folks. And when we talk about how we go about onboarding clients and working through our sales process, it's a thinking process. It's not a template. It's not ask these questions, do this, X will turn into Z. It's, here, let's keep these concepts in place. What do we understand about the client? So awesome. Well, Scott, this is great. What have we missed? What else would you like to share with the audience that we've not talked about yet that I missed because I just didn't ask the right question?
Well, so, I mean, if we continue with the thread we were going down, I think there's still some instructive insights there, right? And that is the other very common trait that I've seen is all of these folks care deeply about the results of their clients, right? So that's the thing, right? Like we're doing this for the right reasons. And the epitome of this example, I interviewed a gentleman named John Hinkson. And John is in his early 50s, started in sales for the first time 3-4 years ago, selling cars. And in his first 3 years with zero sales experience, John has sold 1,600 cars. And again, like I don't have context for that. I'm like, well, that sounds like a lot. The reality is that is probably 4 times what a veteran car seller produces. And the way he did it was just that. Like, no, I've had crummy experiences every time I've come into a dealership my entire life. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give people a good experience. I'm going to take care of them. I'm going to treat them the way I'd want them to treat me. And lo and behold, he's killing it and has crazy referral business. He has the referral business of somebody who's been in the business for 25 years and he's been in for 3. So this stuff works. You have to trust it and you have to move away from the stereotypes. I mean, somebody just reached out to me pretty recently about, hey, we're trying to do one of these big thought leader article things. And, what's your favorite sales movie? And I said, you know what, I'm not going to participate in that because I can't think of a sales movie that really articulates what this profession is really about in a way that's just not really, really wrong.
It is, yeah. Well, and they all really perpetuate the stereotypes. So they're fun to laugh at. Like Tommy Boy will make references. I mean, they're fun to laugh at because you see the challenges that people run into. But what it does is it continues to perpetuate that stereotype that is not reflective of what good sales is. And Scott, you talked about it a little bit earlier about the leadership component. If you're leading your team based on a set of KPI metrics that are focused on how many calls you did, how many meetings you had, how many whatever, and you're not focusing on the things that actually impact the success of your clients, impact the success of those implementations, impact the success of your business and lead to the number, then all you're doing is you're recreating that same environment and probably frustrating a lot of members of your team that really could be successful if you gave them the latitude to apply their own personality to their roles.
Yeah. So, I mean, Talene Savadian, another recent interview, top recruiter at a very large global recruiting agency. And that was almost the first thing that she said is throw out the KPIs. Like, I realize you want me to be on the phone 6 hours a day and X, Y, and Z, but I'm going to focus on the results. And that's what I'm going to do. And hey, here again, she's been there like 2-3 years. I mean, very short period of time. And she's the number one recruiter globally. So, it works at the end of the day. I think, to answer your previous question about what else, I think if you're both sides, whether you're an individual contributor or you're leading a team, you've got to seek out meaningful information, inspiration, go out there, find mentors. I mean, and that's the other just massive theme in this is that nearly every single one of the people I talk to, other people are a massive influence and contributor to their success, and they maximize the crud out of it. I mean, we're going to have a whole presentation on just that. We're going to talk about Jacqueline Nicholson from Percolate is going to talk about mentoring and coaching and how to apply those and how they're different, because that's the difference. We don't achieve this by ourselves. You've got to go out there. And I always joke about forget the sales experts who haven't sold in decades. That said, there are some great books out there. I mean, there's still a lot of other really solid content that is really usable. You've just got to seek it out. And I'm probably preaching to the choir because at this point you've been listening to us for 30 minutes or so. And, you're invested in your own success listening to something like this. And that's great. Like, keep doing it, keep learning. And it works. You just have to apply it.
And you share it with others. So, as you start to come across things that you find interesting, whether it's on Scott's podcast or some of the other ones that are out there. I mean, Tim Ferriss's podcast is one I really enjoy because of the experts that he has on there and the deconstructing success and, again, some pattern recognition that occurs there. Reid Hoffman has Masters of Scale. Tiffany Bova, who's been on the podcast before, has the What's Next podcast. These are all great sources of information that are out there, that are available to you, that are free. There are no barriers to entry to get them, and you can share it with others. I hope that Apple Podcast and some other function makes it a little bit easier to share content with others. I mean, because it's clunky. It's like, okay, what's a podcast? How do I get it? If I can't get my mom to click on a link and look at a podcast, then it probably is too hard to do it. He's got to pass the mom test or the grandma test. But Scott, I really enjoyed the conversation. I want to highlight a couple of takeaways just to really reinforce them for the audience. One, it's your approach to being successful is individualized. It is not about copying somebody else. You might be able to apply some of the concepts and ideas that they share, but they're not you. You've got to be your own self. And that's not to get all fluffy and you're a special snowflake out there, but you've really got to put your own personal view on things. And by gathering information from multiple mentors and by mentoring others, you can create this environment where you constantly are evolving yourself. You're constantly learning from others. The other piece, and we've talked about it a lot of times, but if you focus on the success of your customers, things will work out. Things will work out for you in the long run and work out for them in the short term. Don't focus on just the short-term activities. Play the long game. And you know what? Sometimes you're going to run out of time. Sometimes the quarter comes up to an end or the year comes up to an end and the deal doesn't come together. Don't force it just for the sake of hitting your number. And I know that's a hard thing for people to accept. It's, hey, I've got to hit my number. I've got goals that I need to accomplish. But those partnerships that you create are there for the long term. So don't force stuff. Scott, thank you very much for joining the podcast. Where can people find more about you?
Yeah, great question. And just to finish up your last thought, at the end of the day, you will run out of time on certain deals. And that's why pipeline saves lives. So you just have to have enough coverage that you're not dependent on any one deal closing this month or this quarter. So folks can learn about me. The main podcast website is top1.fm. And the site for the Sales Success Summit is top1summit.com. And Mike, for your audience, I've got a referral code they can use. If they type in Catalyst when they're registering, that will save them $150 on their registration. So we'd love to see folks out there. We are going to have one heck of a time May 7th and 8th here in Austin.
Fantastic. Thank you, Scott. This has been so good. You and Mike really did a good job here. And I hope people check out your podcast too, because we're interested in sales. That's why we're here. So it's a natural path to go to your podcast and the summit. That sounds like a lot of fun. I really love how you're not doing it how people would expect a conference to be. So I'm really looking forward to what you're doing, Scott. Thank you so much for being a guest.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale Podcast.